Good morning. It's a chilly February 22nd, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. Quite a lineup of twos, eh? The second month, 22nd day, 2022. I had a fella approach me at the Calgary protests, me and Eva there, and he was talking something about in a spiritual sense. This is apparently really good luck and such. I'm not a real spiritual person, but these days we need all the luck we can get. So maybe today somehow is going to turn out to be a good day with all those number twos. So this show is a Western Standards live show. For those who haven't been here before, we come every weekday, Monday to Friday, aside from on holidays like yesterday at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And we have a number of guests, discuss news items, and of course have my constant ranting. This being a live show, we can have commenters, as we can see in the comment scroll. The comments are welcome. I love it when I see people commenting and discussing things back and forth with each other. We just want to keep it fairly civil. We can, offer questions to the guests. I try to get to them when I can. We won't always be able to necessarily answer every question, but I do watch all of them all, and I appreciate seeing that participation. I got a couple of really good guests today. Andrew Allison, he's a philosophy PhD student in the U of C, and he writes columns for the Western Standard, and he wrote a column talking about how the Emergencies Act is creating modern-day slaves, and it is. Crazy as it sounds like it might be extreme. It's true. Then I'm going to have Tea Party co-founder and presidential speechwriter Michael Johns on, and he's going to talk about the state of affairs in Canada, along with some talk and tips about grassroots organization. I mean, he knows about organizing, getting conservative groups going, how to break the status quo. I mean, the Tea Party kind of came and went, but there's no doubt they had a very distinct impression upon American politics. And it's going to be very interesting talking to Mr. Johns about that. I'm going to get on with what's got me triggered today pretty soon, but I want to speak to our sponsor first. And it's good to see so many commenters on there. We got people, Kathy in BC and Cynthia in Vulcan, Tiana in Alberta, Matt in Fairview. What a great load of people from all over the West here. And we get people out East as well. So thank you for joining. And aside from the viewership, it is the sponsors who help us keep these gears rolling as independent media, cutting through the BS and getting to the point. Bitcoin Well. Talk about a time to be looking into digital currencies. This is the one. The government is coming out and trying to steal people's money. I mean, they are seizing bank accounts. They are, based on political views, based on what you might want to do. Now, Bitcoin Well, these guys don't take a political stance, but what they do is facilitate your means and ability to get into the world of buying Bitcoin. Because, hey, if you've never done it, you're not too sure about it, this is the fastest and safest way to do it. It's non-custodial. That's the thing. That's where people get worried. You control your wallet. Bitcoin Well never has control of it, but your bank doesn't have control of it. You set up a wallet, your Bitcoin goes into there, and it's yours. These guys help you set that up and do that. It's always in your control. Nobody can take your money away from you. You can get it all set up online. They say set it and forget it. Savings plans. You can have your money going into your Bitcoin wallet and protecting it from outside sources like the government. It's also just a great way to start saving on those things. So check them out, bitcoinwell.com. They're a Western Canadian company. They'll help you get into the world of digital currency before the government gets into your bank accounts and takes away what you've worked so hard to make, I should say. So let's get on what's got me triggered about today. Canada. I'm 51, just turned 51 on the weekend. Never thought I would see this. We're formally under a form of martial law. This has only happened 3 times before in the history of this nation. Once in World War I, once in World War II, and a third time in 1970 during the October crisis when the FLQ terrorists were setting bombs, kidnapping, and killing people. Today, we are living under martial law because a truckers' protest took up space in Ottawa and erected bouncy castles while honking horns. Now, some people have been getting upset with the use of the term martial law right now, but I assure you it's completely applicable and it's not an exaggeration of our current state. Here's the definition. Martial law is the temporary imposition of direct military control of normal civil functions or a suspension of civil law by a government, especially in response to a temporary emergency where civil forces are overwhelmed or in an occupied territory. Now, yes, we don't have military control going on right now, thankfully, not yet, but we do have a suspension of civil law, and that is a form of martial law. So don't let them try to tell you that that's not where we're at. The rights of citizens have been suspended, and a majority within the parliament has now enshrined that suspension in formally adopting Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act. Labor can now be literally forced. For example, a tow truck driver could face fines or imprisonment if they refuse to work when ordered to by a police officer. This could be extended in other ways. Who knows where it ends? Will a restaurant be forced to serve police forces? Hotels forced to accommodate government agents. Think of being forced to work at gunpoint. That's literally what the government now has the ability to do. You apparently will be compensated, but the government will determine by how much. Paid slavery is slavery nonetheless. Compelled labor is slavery by definition. My guest Andrew Allison is going to be expanding on that a little later today. The government's now empowered to steal your property. They can seize your bank accounts without warrant. They can impound your vehicles and even your pets. This is all without the normal due process of courts, warrants, and judicial oversight. It's impossible to overstate just how serious and dangerous this is. And for what? The protests in Ottawa are gone. The border blockades have been dismantled and the organizers have been in jail. Things were shut down using local authorities and without the need for the imposition of the Emergencies Act. It won't be hard for local police to keep further barricades or occupations from being set up at this point. So why the need for the Emergencies Act now? Well, in one word, vengeance. The Canadian political and media establishment are furious. Citizens have bypassed the media narrative, ignored the government, and organized protests despite them. Trudeau was exposed as the weak leader he is, while the establishment media was exposed as the shameless trumpet for Trudeau's government that they are. The Laurentian elite has been embarrassed, and they want to punish those who did it. They're now on a witch hunt. The CBC's gleefully been sharing the names of people who donated to protests, while the government is ordering banks to seize assets of those they deem to be complicit. They want to chase down and bankrupt every person who dared to stand up to them. And the Emergencies Act allows them to do so now without the controls of civil law. They want to make examples of the citizens who pushed back against the state and put fear into other citizens with the intent of maintaining control. Ottawa's acting police chief, Steve Bell, made no bones about it when he said, if you're involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges. This unlawful occupation is over. We will continue with our mission until it's complete. Well, what makes it complete? When does it end? How far are you going to keep running? Our columnist, Linda Sabodian, by the way, wrote on that at length. Go to westernstandardonline.com and check it out. Now, protest organizer Tamara Leach remains in jail without bail for daring to defy the state. Murderers in Canada are often given the courtesy of bail while their trials await, but apparently this lady presents such a threat to society that she must remain isolated and behind bars. Her assets have been seized, her ability to communicate stolen, and her freedom taken. What harm could she possibly present if free? She even indicated in court she would no longer keep actively organizing. She just wants to go home at this point. It's not as if she was intransigent. You know, in bail hearings, they'll usually say, as long as you commit to not reoffending, we will let you out until we get up to trial. But no, they're keeping her locked up out of spite to punish. And it's beyond the pale. She is a political prisoner. That is what she is. And we are under martial law. No Canadian citizen should be treated this way. With the Emergencies Act in place, though, there's nothing to prevent this. Trudeau was characteristically callow, as he didn't even show his face in Parliament to vote on the act, the Emergencies Act that he brought in, his version of the War Measures Act. They've now given themselves a week off in order to hide from public scrutiny as martial law continues. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh chose power over principle as he forced every NDP member to join Trudeau in his power grab. Tommy Douglas must be just doing backflips in his grave. Tommy Douglas even voted against martial law back in 1970 when the FLQ was setting bombs and kidnapping and killing people. I don't think the classic Labour NDP would support this power grab today if they're around. But for Jagmeet Singh, it was more important to stay close to Trudeau than to stand on principle. And it's sad. Protests have been happening across the planet as people push back against pandemic mandates. Only Canada, though, has felt compelled to implement martial law. Provinces, they're dropping mandates as nations around the world are. Only the federal government in Canada appears to be unmoving and refusing to considering lifting the controls they've imposed. This is clearly not about health. It's all about control. And Trudeau now has it. He's truly empowered himself as a tyrant. And being the petty little man he is, he will use that power to crack down on citizens further. There's no telling where this is going to end. How many lives will the government crush in their zeal to end political dissent? Whenever this phase in Canada's history comes to a close, one thing will be sure. Canada is broken, and it may well be beyond repair. That's what got me triggered today. It's probably going to have me triggered for quite some time. Now let's check in with Melanie Risden, our senior reporter in the newsroom, and see what's being done now. We've had a lot to catch up on after such a busy, long weekend. Hey, Melanie, how's it going in there?
Good, busy. Yes, we've got some stories that we're working on. As you were just mentioning, the Freedom Convoy organizer Tamara Leach denied bail. Judge said her detention is necessary for the protection and safety of the public. We have a link to the story. Eva, one of our other reporters here, had posted a story just last week with Leach taking to Facebook and sort of imploring people to stay safe, stay respectful of the authorities, to proceed with love, kind of a thing. So it seems interesting with that presence to have her deemed that her detention is necessary for the protection and safety of the public. And as you mentioned, with the vote that happened in Parliament last night, we do have a breakdown on how MPs voted. So if you want to see how your MP voted towards the invoking of the Emergency Act, you can check that out on our website. We've got a breakdown there. We also have a story out on the RCMP are looking into a leaked chat. It was sort of looked like a Telegram chat group between RCMP officers in Ottawa, and some of the comments through the tweet were I think quite disturbing for many people. Some referring to the trampling of a woman as awesome, and another tweet or another message in the chain said save some for us. And another message even said, time for the protesters to hear our jackboots on the ground. So sounds like RCMP are looking into the comments made by that group. So hoping we'll hear a bit of more toward that. I'm sure when we're talking about peaceful protesters being, apprehended by police, it would be, I think, due diligence would say that police will also need to be showing a peaceful approach to it as much as possible. So some of these statements, I think, have been very disturbing for a lot of Canadians to see coming from our authorities. We're also working on a story where a Toronto Liberal MP is tying a link to the term honk honk and Heil Hitler. So we'll have that up on the site here fairly quickly, and working on quite a few other stories throughout the day today. One thing I wanted to point out too is the Alberta government is back in court this week, and it looks like we could see Dr. Dina Hinshaw take the stand at some point this week. We may see that happen. It looks like everything has sort of been delayed. So if she does take the stand, it's likely going to be potentially Thursday, but we will also see an adjournment until April. So it sounds like the hope is they will be able to cross-examine her before the adjournment, but I guess we'll have to wait and see how things play out for the next couple of days. And on our website, we do have information on how you can request a link to watch those court proceedings.
Great. And before I left the newsroom, I know there were some comments. It sounds like I'm sure we'll be reporting on it once we get the facts. The Rideau Centre has been evacuated in Ottawa right now. Something has gone on. I mean, we don't know much details on what's happened down there, but that's right up in Parliament area. It's a shopping area for people, and
yeah,
it sounds, it's always serious when you hear about an evacuation and possibly a person with a firearm.
Well, there's a rumor that it was a shoplifter. I'm not sure if we have confirmation on that, but looks like it was a shoplifter. I don't have confirmation on whether the shoplifter was carrying a weapon, but certainly once we have all of the solid details on that, we'll have that out on the website as well.
Great. Yes, things break fast, and well, we just like to get through those facts. As you pointed out, I mean, it's just when things break on the internet, you get all those crazy rumors and stuff is flying around, and that's why we've got to take our time when these sort of things happen to make sure we get the facts in before we report them. So I'll let you get back into digging into those facts, Melanie, and I appreciate the update, and we'll talk to you later.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cory.
Great, thanks. So yeah, with the westernstandardonline.com. I see Nico's brought up the link. That's where you can see the news as we report it and expand upon it as the facts come in, because, I mean, everything breaks so quickly right now. We've got a lot of irresponsible media out there. We know that, that's for sure. We've been watching those battles going on the internet. Say, for example, the very liberal New York Times dared to report that people were being arrested at gunpoint in Ottawa. And the liberal media went bananas about it. Gerald Butts went bananas about it. Oh, you're lying. You're spreading fake news. Well, you know what? A whole bunch of pictures showed pictures of police with guns drawn on people, arresting them, breaking up the convoy. So what do you got here? You've got a liberal establishment media that is accusing others of lying if another media outlet reports something that doesn't fit with their narrative. That's what you have. And that's really dangerous. And it shows a lot. You know, the New York Times is very, very liberal. They are left-leaning. But the thing is, they're not under the thumb of the federal government. That's the difference. So even as a left-leaning paper, they're American, and they can't be told what to do, like a lot of publications in Canada and media outlets that are taking government funding. That's why we don't take government funding, by the way. So, you know, and Nico's left that up there. We don't care if the government's ticked off with us. We're going to report and cut through their BS narrative. So westernstandardonline.com/membership. You can see that up there. Nico brought it up. Check it out. $10 a month. You get full unfettered access to our breaking news, to our columns, to every sort of special we've got on there. And it helps. The more subscriptions we get, of course, the more we can hire more reporters. We just picked somebody up on the ground in Ottawa now. We've got Amber set up in Edmonton in the legislature. We are really building as an organization, and we appreciate it. And it's thanks to you guys, your support with those memberships. It's a free trial for the first 2 weeks. And then after that, you can choose to keep it going, or you might think it's not worth $10 a month. 95% of the people who try that 2-week trial say, hey, this is good money, well spent, and I'm going to stay on as a subscriber. So check it out, take out a subscription, and we shall keep reporting that news unfettered towards you. My next guest is going to be coming in studio right away. Maybe I'll speak briefly of our other sponsor before he pops in here. And that's the Canada Shooting Sports Association. These guys are good. They stand up for individual rights. They stand up for your properties. And their name kind of says it all. Canada Shooting Sports Association. They're an association for responsible, legal firearm owners, whether you use it for hunting, target shooting, collecting. It's up to you. It doesn't matter. You shouldn't have to justify why you want to own them anyway, as long as you're a legal, responsible person. These guys give you the resources to use your firearms and enjoy them, and they are standing up for your rights as well. They have multiple legal challenges out on behalf of firearm owners, and they need members. So check them out. Their website is cssa-cila.org, or just Google Canada Shooting Sports Association and look into taking a membership. So we're going to pop in with our guest here, and that's Andrew Allison, and he wrote a column for us last week. And yeah, Nico's pulled up a picture here just as Andrew gets set up. This was from the Calgary protests that I attended last weekend with Eva and Derek Fildebrand, and I wrote a column on our experience, actually. Check it out at the Western Standard Online. Fun, and it was down there. And but also the other thing was the mainstream media didn't even act as if a rally had happened in Calgary. We had thousands and thousands of people on the streets marching, peaceful, expressing themselves, and the mainstream media, all they reported on the CTV National was 100 people gathered in Edmonton, which turns out it was actually 1,200. We've live streamed their whole walk. Check it out on our YouTube channel if you want to see how many thousands of people walked through Calgary. And yeah, we will continue to report things when the mainstream media refuses to. So let's get to our guest here. Andrew Allison, good to join me in studio. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Cory. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So you wrote a column recently, and I'll frame it up. And I said it earlier in the introduction, and in my rant, I was talking about it and you're a PhD philosophy student.
That's right.
So you're looking to get into a career of thinking.
That's the plan.
And examining and coming to conclusions. And it's important. And it's good to look at the longer impacts, bigger things, rather than say just a narrow policy wonk. And reading into the Emergencies Act and the ability to force labor, it technically can be called slavery.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see that as involuntary servitude. I think the Emergencies Act in general has lots of problems when it comes to protecting the property rights of Canadians. With regards to like the tow truck example, there's a couple problems. The first is that they have a property right in their tow trucks, right, their equipment, and they should have the right to use it as they see fit, right? You can't force someone to use your property in such way, or obviously that's a violation of property rights. But perhaps more importantly is that they have a property right in their bodies, and if you can say you now must go do this or you will go to jail, then this is sort of involuntary servitude. They're threatening you to lock you in a cage unless you do what they ask, and I certainly see that as involuntary servitude.
Absolutely. I mean, by full definition, and you said it clearly in your column. I mean, you weren't trying to make a direct comparison of the slavery back in the 1850s in the United States or anything like that, but still, technically, it's forced labor. You have no choice by force of law and physical force, if it comes to it,
Exactly.
to do what they compel you to do, and that's a scary precedent. Now that's been enshrined in last night's law for as long as 30 days or more.
Absolutely, and it's scary stuff, and that's why I think Canadians should be worried about this Emergencies Act and how long it can continue to operate.
So, what are other aspects of the Emergencies Act? I mean, we talked about tow truck drivers. I mean, there's seizure of property with bank accounts. We've got a lot of things going on. I feel it's going to be disruptive to the nation in general and in trust. Like, we got some larger, broader implications of this whole imposition of this act, right?
Right. I mean, absolutely. Like you said, the bank accounts could possibly be frozen. Also, the act makes so that the federal government can control the way certain commodities might move, right? Like water and gasoline to the truckers, things like that. And, like I said, this is a massive violation of property rights, something that we think is quite important here in Canada, sort of a free Western country. But they can say, you can't do such and such with your property as you would see fit. Instead, you have to do what we decide to do, right? Which is to not help the truckers or something like that. And I absolutely see that as a big problem. And if the federal government can enact that, on what seems to be somewhat flimsy grounds, though obviously I'm not a lawyer, you worry, how much can I protect my money in the bank, right? How much can I protect my gasoline, my water that I want to use the way I want to? So I'm certainly worried.
Well, some of the language was disturbing. I can't remember which federal minister it was. It was the emergencies minister. So many of them keep talking. One we don't hear a lot from definitively of is actually the prime minister, because when he's left alone to talk on his own, he often gets in trouble. But this minister spoke along the lines of called it like a Trumpist movement, and we're going to track down. Like, that's love or hate Trump or whatever it might be. You're saying you're going to crack down on people due to political philosophy. That's a big line. We're not talking about trying to crack down on people who have blocked infrastructure or put people at risk. Now you're talking about people who wrong think.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think there should definitely be concern for that, right? If they think that you're aiding what they call like an unpeaceful protest or something like that, right? It seems that we want to think that we have this sort of right to assemble and that sort of thing, right? Freedom of conscience, freedom of belief. But right, if they can certainly attack certain people just for their position, then maybe that sort of thing is threatened, and definitely something to worry about.
Well, yeah, and this is very broad. I mean, with where they're talking about how we can seize assets from people who appear to be supporting the protest. Well, they don't say exactly how. I mean, they're seizing assets of people who made a donation. Okay, they got that information, which they wrongly got that information, so that's a whole separate affair as well. But where does that stop? I mean, I'm on Twitter. I'm pretty tend to be supportive of the protests. I'm not an organizer or anything by any means, and I want them to stay peaceful. But would that be enough at some point? Would they say, you know what, Morgan, you've crossed the line, and we're taking your bank account?
Yeah, I really don't know, and I think it'll be interesting to see after the fact. Because people really will have to try to, get back their property. And so I'm really curious to see in the future how that sort of legal, that works out through the legal system, because I will be curious what constitutes aiding an illegal protest with this Emergencies Act. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, and I don't think we'll have any legal recourse until this act is gone. I mean, that's the bottom line of the act, is saying they can do this without the need for warrants, without judicial oversight, any of those things. So people with their property seized might have it seized for 30 days, 60 days. I mean, we don't know until the act is gone. I'm certain, I mean, there's lawyers are lining up out the door to get on this, because this is just beyond the pale. But some people's lives could be terribly upset and ruined by this as the government drags their feet on holding this act on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I look forward to see what's happening. And as you said, it could take forever. And I don't exactly trust the federal government to be the most efficient in taking care of these sorts of issues.
No, I mean, they've had, 10 years to try and get their own payroll system sorted out.
That's
Not
right.
20, I think. And they still, I mean, so can't just blame the liberals. The conservatives never managed it either. Government doesn't do anything fast, efficiently, or typically good for the citizens. I mean, part of my bigger worry of this too is though how Canadians accept it. Like I almost worry this act comes and goes and they don't do a heck of a lot more, but it adds to the sense of complacency. Oh, this wasn't so bad. This wasn't so significant. This wasn't so dangerous. And people can't let themselves get lulled into that. I mean, if the government gets away with it once, they will do it again.
Right. Absolutely. And that's why I'm really interested to seeing sort of where the court of public opinion lands in terms of whether or not it was legitimate to enact the act. Which I think, like you said, should be a concern for Canadians in general if you're worried about their ability to seize property, to stop you from protesting peaceful assembly. But another issue is going to be for the provinces, right? If the RCMP can now take care of that which was previously given to the provinces or municipalities, it sort of seems like this might be a problem for our federalism if the threshold to enact the act is considered quite low, so I'm definitely worried about something like that.
Yeah, well, and this has put a real pressure on Canadian unity in a lot of ways. I was talking to a fellow, George Clark, actually called me earlier today, but he pointed out something that really stuck in my mind that was interesting, though. We had so much regionalism, and a lot of the people initially going to Ottawa were actually, as they were thrown, derogatory terms were thrown. I'm saying they're all, for Western independence or anything. No, but there's probably a lot of among them. But it morphed into actually a very patriotic sort of thing. I mean, town after town, city after city, it turned into a flag waving thing. At first, there were even some of the upside down flags, which people were saying is a sign of distress. And you're seeing fewer and fewer of those. You're seeing a bunch of Canadian flags. We're actually seeing the nation more unified than we've seen in a long time. But now with this all cracking down on it again, we're seeing unity getting shattered all over again. I'm just talking in the broader sense of a side effects of this whole affair and how it's kind of had an up and down on unity. I mean, the Bloc Québécois, of course, is very strongly opposed to the use of martial law and the imposition of the Emergencies Act. And of course, Westerners are always upset with federal incursion. As you said, now the RCMP might be stepping in on provincial turf. This sort of move could shatter national unity.
I mean, absolutely. And I mean, the wounds of 50 years ago, it's still not healed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see you say the Bloc, of course, is opposed to it. And I understand why, right? This seems like an intrusion of like a centralized federalism, where maybe the provinces prefer a more decentralized system. And I'm certainly worried about something like that. One at least positive note that I see from the public response to this is I see a lot of people saying, oh, it's not the same as the War Measures Act, when they were running around arresting people. But at least maybe there's a public conscience now that sees there was something wrong with that 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm at least sort of seeing if people are rushing to defend to say, oh, this isn't as bad as the War Measures Act, that at least, though it's taken half a century, maybe some people have seen the how horrible that War Measures Act really was.
Well, and it was a form of martial law. I mean, the Emergencies Act is just the rebranded War Measures Act. Right. And I know there was some changes made to the act itself as well. It's not a complete carbon copy with a new name, but the principle is the same. It's a means to suspend common civil rights in the event of an emergency. I mean, it can be somewhat acceptable in a sense. I mean, if the aliens are invading, if the zombies are coming up out of the ground, if there really was a province that had a violent insurrection of armed people, taking over a town or a city, this is nothing even close to that, not even vaguely close to that. And the precedent's been set that you can impose this thing on a relatively minor ground.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that's incredibly scary for individual Canadians, and I think it's incredibly scary for the provinces if those powers that they think are provincial or more local can be stripped away so easily. So I really do not look forward to, but I am very interested in seeing how public opinion will say, was this legitimate to enact the act at this point? So I'm curious.
Yeah, and we're seeing also, we're going to see provincial opinions. I mean, 7 out of 10 premiers opposed the imposition of this act. That didn't make enough news. I mean, I gross a lot about the news as it is, but that should be very significant. That should be saying, wow, like that's the threshold to change the Constitution. Yeah. And yet still, without a thought, the federal government said, no, I don't care what 7 out of 10 premiers say. We're bringing this in. And Jason Kenney, to his credit, has launched a court challenge now against this. But these court challenges, again, I mean, right now, the person who can't make their mortgage payment is in trouble. Right now, Tamara Leach is locked in jail. Right now, property is being seized. Even dogs. I mean, that was one of the things they put out is we could take your dog, and if it's not claimed, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because it's just property. And if they're not claimed after 8 days, they said, well, we'll do whatever we do with dogs when they're claimed for too long. Like, this is not minor, especially if it doesn't impact the individual Canadian. I guess that's what I want to see. Just because you're comfortable at home and it doesn't seem like a big deal to you, do enough Canadians look at the broader sense, though, of how important this is. I mean, it's that apathy of a spoiled public. I think we kind of get.
Right.
Didn't impact me, so it's not such a bad thing. I'm not going to get upset about it. I worry about that attitude entrenching with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious what'll happen 5, 10 years, 50 years down the road, right? Will people look at this as like a horrific thing, as maybe we're starting to do now with Trudeau Sr.? I really am curious, and I think we're living through really a historic moment in Canadian history. And I really hope that public opinion can sway to see that this is not the sort of thing that we want to do in sort of a free country. I think.
No, and I mean, there's other implications. I mean, it's almost a little unfair on Justin Trudeau. Okay, he's got to follow in the footsteps of his father. You're in the shadow of a man who is a large part of Canadian history. Not a real popular man out here in the West,
No.
but I mean, there's no denying that he was a piece of Canadian history and
Right.
a significant one. And he's well known for his "just watch me" moment when he dealt with the FLQ. And I think perhaps the Prime Minister, the current one, Justin, feels, well, I've got to have my "just watch me" moment too. And I don't care if it's as pressing as the FLQ October crisis. I'm going to invoke this act because I want to go down in history like Dad. And I don't think history is going to view him that way.
No, I think you're right. I think that's certainly a possibility. And I am very optimistic about the future. And I feel that just as we don't look positively now on the War Measures Act, or at least many don't, I think that the same can be said about the Emergencies Act in 2022.
Yeah, well, history might not look kindly, but I'm hoping maybe though we can learn to get some positives out of this then and then bring in some more checks and balances.
That's right.
There's part of the problem. We've got a Senate that's appointed, so they're not going to be that check on this that we would hope or that it was even modeled to be. It's not really a chamber of sober second thought. They're appointed by the Prime Minister. Some people even talk about the Governor General intervening, but that's just a figurehead. I mean, it's just theoretical power. And our courts are appointed. Like have unfortunately not a really good means of stopping something if a Prime Minister gets out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Canadians are going to have to look at the federalism that they've been given, right? And we're going to have to start wondering if there's a place at all for the federal government to usurp those powers from the provinces or from the individual, right? The right over your property, right over your person. If there's a place at all for that in Canada. And like you said, hopefully people will start to see that there's maybe not a place for that at all.
I hope so. I mean, we need reasoned discussion in a time when there's not been a lot of it going on. I mean, I believe in the need for an Emergencies Act.
Right.
Again, I mean, there could be all sorts of crazy disasters. I mean, we're back into Cold War days. Russia is expanding into Ukraine. Things can happen. A government needs an ability to pivot quickly, respond to something. I mean, that's how it sort of was modeled with this. You could start it off for 7 days, but then you needed parliamentary oversight. I think we need some more oversight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish I had some perfect institutional answer for you, right? Oh, we'll just put this check here and this balance here. But
yeah, I'll corner the lawyers with that when I get them in as guests. You're the philosopher here. And
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of a general Canadian psyche and thoughts. Because I mean, public figures tend to follow public opinion. They try to mold public opinion, and it's an ongoing game. But as you said, history may not look back wisely on it or well on this, but how far into history we're going to have to go before Canadians say, wow, that was a piss poor idea.
Yeah, that's absolutely the scary thing, right? And certainly it seems public opinion now so far, seems to be with Trudeau generally. And, I'm sort of curious to see who those maybe toward like NDP supporters might feel about this, right? With Singh and the NDP coming out supporting the act. The left, they have a few people that really might correctly view this as sort of tyrannical, right? And I wonder if it might be, the voices on the left and the right might come together on this, but it's those, that large majority that maybe doesn't see it that way.
Well, I'm really hoping to see some break ranks. Like the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, they are not a conservative organization by any measure, and they have come out strongly against this, very strongly. I mean, they understand most of the more contemporary examples we've seen in North America of the government cracking down on free assembly and protest have been cracking down against left-wing protests. So, I mean, they understand this could be turned against them and probably will in the future if we allow it to happen now.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. I think that there's definitely a fear of that. And I hopefully that some, maybe those who remember time further back when certainly they were cracking down on leftist protests and leftist assembly a lot more than maybe conservative assembly or something like that, that they'll see that this is a problem. But I'm not sure, maybe younger folks, people maybe my age, They think, this is what's best, right? We've got to stop those right wingers.
Yeah, well, you get a little taste of tear gas and your perspective changes really quickly. It's not a pleasant experience. Boy, just crazy times. Anyways, as you said, I mean, I appreciate that you want to look forward to things with optimism, though. I mean, hopefully we can polish this turd and bring something decent out of what is a very strange turning point in Canadian history, I guess is the best way to put it. So we look forward to more columns from you. And where else can people find information on what you're up to and what you're doing out there?
On Twitter at @AndrewD_Allison. And if you're an academic, cite me, because that would be a real help to my career.
Oh, yes. You need those things for that PhD. And all.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you coming in today and, lending a perspective on again, these crazy times. We just need as many people to sit and think for a minute, I think, before acting. So
that's right. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay. We'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Take care.
Okay. So that was Andrew Allison. He has written a column recently for the Western Standard. And as you can see, he's definitely putting thought into this, as we need more people to do. And I really appreciated that perspective out of him. It's just so critical that we start examining this rather than too far down on the historical road, and do it sooner rather than later. So yes, I see lots of comments. I know I haven't gotten to too many. And again, another good guest I'm going to have coming up in a little while is going to be Michael Johns. He's going to be on in about 12 minutes. And he's, again, was a co-founder of the Tea Party. Whether you agreed or disagreed, talk about a man who was a part of a large movement that really shook things up in a much larger country than ours. That took planning, that took organization. This convoy was different. This was organic. This was more ground level. I think that's part of what scared the state and the establishment so much about it. You can't see it coming. Nobody saw it coming. That's part of what's so infuriating with Tamara Lich. If you look at statements from her, as Melanie was talking about on the news, there's videos out there. She was constantly calling for peaceful protest. She's never been a known agitator. She's got no, to my knowledge, criminal records or anything like that behind her. And she's locked up. They say she's a danger to society. She just wanted to start a fund up initially that she felt was going to raise $10,000 or $100,000 to help the truckers convoy, and it snowballed into a massive movement, of course, where we got millions and millions of dollars donated and then seized and then held and then all of this craziness. Because again, the state doesn't want to allow us to organize outside of what they feel is appropriate. You got to remember those fundraising sites were shut down before the Emergencies Act was imposed. So it does a couple of things. For one, I don't think they should have been able to pressure and shut them down, but the government didn't need that hammer. They didn't need that ability to cut things off. They didn't need the Emergencies Act to do it, but they still pursued it and got it. And some of the other absurdity going on out there, honk honk. If you go on social media, if you go on Twitter, you see a lot of people throwing that out there. God. And this actually, now we got liberal members of parliament. You got to remember, we have a prime minister who called a Jew a Nazi and hasn't apologized for it. He did. He literally did. We covered that the other week. That's how insane that man is and how stupid he is and how insensitive he is. So it's no surprise when his own lackeys will go on and spread the other crap. So honk honk, people have jokingly, whenever Trudeau would tweet something or something, I did it. I'd tweet back at him just honk honk. It's just my way of dismissing you, and I'm not thinking highly of you. And of course, it's referencing the honking of the horns in the truckers' convoy. Well, some 4chan thing or something hidden way down in the bowels of the internet. If you dig in the bowels of the internet, you're going to find some nasty stuff. You always do. So you can find anything anywhere. So somebody found a 4chan reference or something that's like honk honk is actually code for Hail Hitler. Come on. Fine. You can see imbeciles throwing that out on Twitter and all over the place out there. But to have a Liberal member of Parliament say that now? Really? This is our leadership? This is the person, one of the people who voted to determine whether or not to invoke the Emergencies Act upon Canadians, to bring in martial law, and he calls honk honk a Hail Hitler thing. This is the level of discourse we've got going on in our government right now, and it's disturbing. These are the people now who control our lives and control our lives beyond what civil law protected us with. That's really frightening. These are shallow, tyrannical people. And what was it? Let's talk about stupid Twitter accounts. How about Ed the Sock? For those old enough to remember, he was some sort of joking commentator on music videos, and he tried to get the Twitter army going because they're upset because people are calling Trudeau a tyrant. Look it up. Just like with martial law, guys, if you look at the definitions of what it is a tyrant. It is a tyranny right now, a tyranny. It fits the definitions. It's not an exaggerated word. The government has seized power over the people beyond democratic controls. That's the Emergency Act. So let's quit letting the establishment media and politicians try to sugarcoat this thing. It is serious. It's very serious. I kind of worry, when I was talking to Andrew about that, if it just kind of comes and goes quietly, that a lot of Canadians think, oh, that wasn't so bad. Of course, they aren't the ones who got locked up and had their property seized and their lives ruined. But this can't be let go as a minor thing. There's the text that Nico just pulled up, the text from the Emergency Act. Imposed if it's something seriously endangers the lives, health, or safety of Canadians in such proportions that exceed the capacity of authority in a province. That never happened. It has not happened. But they got away with it anyway. So that means they can get away with it with a minor reason again in the future. And if they do, they will. Governments love power. They love control. That's what they're about. Person goes into politics to gain the ability to control other people. And now they have martial law in Canada. Some of the best coverage, like I said, with the New York Times is a left-wing publication. But some of our other best coverage has been from Fox News because Canada's coverage has been crap. It's Pravda. And yeah, I traveled to the Soviet Union back in '87. I got to see the control of information over there. There was a columnist who brought that up on Twitter and pointed it out. Said, I've never seen something like the CBC with how bad it's gotten, where basically they just parrot what the government tells them to say. Bad enough we pay those guys $1.5 billion a year, but they are a state broadcaster. They get so upset. Oh, there was one. What's her name? Dunn. She's a CBC journalist. She gets so mad when I kept calling her the state broadcaster and then the state broadcaster. Oh, it's not. We're a national broadcaster. No, you are a state broadcaster. You do as the government tells you. And it's showing in your writing and the garbage you're feeding to Canadians. We got to pay $1.5 billion a year to get misinformation and propaganda from you clowns. We are in trouble. We're in trouble. Before I get to my next guest, as soon as he gets in the lobby, I'm going to rip him into here. It'll be a little bit yet. I should speak to our sponsor one more time. And again, it's Bitcoin Well. When we talk about funds being seized, we talk about trying to keep control of your wealth, the money you worked that hard for, the money you worked to save. And now you got to be scared. You should be. I mean, when's the government going to impose that act again? What might you do wrong that might get the government to say, I'm going to seize that guy's account? Like I said, political wrong speak. Maybe you said something on social media that was outside of the bounds, and we had another Emergencies Act because there was a demonstration in Strathmore or something. Well, Bitcoin Well gives you the means to move your funds out of this regular banks, get out of regular currency. It's non-custodial though, so you always have control on it. And again, it is so important. It's just keep mentioning over and over. And these guys help you through it. They got in-person white glove service, free one-on-one consultations in Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, and Winnipeg. I mean, it's a real company because people worry about these outfits, and that's fair enough. These guys are publicly traded, they're regulated, and you can sit down with a real live person and figure out how it can work for you and how to set yourself up and how to get it going. And if you're not in those major cities, they'll still set you up with virtual consultations anywhere in Canada. Get your wallet going, help you take control of your wealth. Now, I do want to get back to the protests on the weekend in Calgary. Just to remind everybody, we put that stream out, and yeah, I wrote on it, oh, it was a gong show. Derek and I were running around like hammerheads, trying to find the right spot to get up there and film this thing and live stream it as it went by. I'm so glad we did, though. I'll give it to Derek for getting on my case and getting us set up in the right spot. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see it up there. I don't know if you want to watch the whole 20 minutes, but to see that stream of thousands of people walking towards the truck, chanting freedom, occasionally chanting Western Standard, we appreciated that support. But it was so positive. Like, you see, that's what we've got to cut through with the media narrative. You know, they'll always find the lone lunatic. When you get a few thousand people together, you're going to get somebody extreme in the bunch. And if you search them out, you can try and paint the rest as being extreme. That was not happening. Everything was so positive, so upbeat, and so determined. And there was no damage. You know, a lot of past protests, when you have thousands of people walking by all those businesses like they did on 8th Avenue and all the way around, you get smashed windows, you get graffiti, you get thefts. It happens. Not with this. Not at all. It was all upbeat, enthusiastic. Eva took some fantastic pictures. If you look at the news on westernstandardonline.com, she wrote some great stories on it. And again, it was completely ignored by the mainstream media. They only want to pretend that there are violent, extreme protests happening across the country. They want to feed the narrative for the federal government to keep this Emergency Act going. We're in grave trouble. The other thing they've talked about is countering misinformation. Now, think about C11. That's the bill that the government wants to impose to control broadcasts. They want to control shows like this one, which is now brings me up to a good time to remind you, get on to Rumble if you're, the only problem with the Rumble, I have to admit, the comments don't work yet with our stream. I can't see them when they come in, but you can watch it. At least subscribe on Rumble if you want to watch this show and other Western Standard things, because you never know if we're going to get canceled off of YouTube or Facebook on a whim. We stream to all of them, but Rumble won't shut us down. So if something happens, you know where you can find us. And if you hadn't subscribed on YouTube and Facebook, by all means, please do that too, because you'll see these when things break, when things happen. We've done that before when it happened in Coutts, when it happened in Ottawa, and we have people on the ground. We will stream it as it happens, and you'll get that alert on your phone, on your computer, wherever it might be, to say, hey, these guys are doing something live. I got to jump in there and have a look. So please do that, because we got to cut past the mainstream media narrative. If you only listen to them, you're going to get an incomplete picture, and it's not a good one, and it's serving the government. And as Nico's got it up there, yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I can be a little nasty on there. That's fine, but that's where I vent. And I also share news items and things like that at Cory B. Morgan. And if you want to interact with me, I get more time to see the comments on there than on here when they're flying by, which is great. But yeah, we've got punishment going on. Somebody's Jade saying feeling bad for the truckers being punished. It's just sickening. It is. Like I said, the protests are gone, but they're still chasing them. They're after them. They're hounding them. They're threatening them. And they're threatening anybody who supports them. This is unprecedented. Have we ever seen this before? Did we see anybody going out? 2 years they've been protesting on the Coastal GasLink pipeline right now, threatening, getting violent. I mean, recently 20 of them, eco-terrorists attacked a work camp up there. Is the government threatening to chase them down? Is the government saying, we're going to find you, we're going to seize your money, we're going to seize the money of anybody who funded you guys, we're going to take your property? No, the cowardly government won't touch them. Caledonia, they've had an illegal occupation going on there for something like 10 years. Government's not going there. They're not talking about seizing property there. Why? Well, for one, it'd be more trouble it's worth to them because there's a hornet's nest out there in Caledonia. It'd be another Oka. But for another thing, it doesn't feed the government's narrative. It doesn't feed what they want to see. And that's control of anything. This turns right and left. Unfortunately, to a degree, some of it comes to that. Most of the people in these marches and these protests tend to be conservative-minded thinkers. Why is that? It's not this fake movement of white supremacy by any means. I'm getting sick of that, and all of that trash trying to dismiss citizens getting up and standing up for themselves. The difference is conservative-minded people want to be left alone. They just want to make their own decisions and their own choices. People who have that left-leaning mindset, they're comfortable with government control. They're all right with it. In fact, they want it. Please, government, take care of me. Please tell me how to live. Tell me what to do. I will comply. And that's why they are happy with seeing these protests shut down. I mean, it should be all about personal choice and medical safety. But instead, it really has turned into a left-right thing. And that's the basis of it, though. That's the mindset. That conservative-minded people and libertarian-minded people are saying, just get out of my hair. Let me choose. People like me, and I know I'll watch the comments. There's somebody who gets mad every time I say it. But yes, I chose to get vaccinated, and I don't regret it. But I want to make sure everybody has a choice. They have to have a choice. That's the integral part. That's what's got me worked up. And people should be allowed to say no. They shouldn't be demonized, shamed, chased out of their workplace. They shouldn't be banned from travel. They shouldn't have their children banned from going to sporting events. They shouldn't be banned from even going to restaurants. But that's what's been happening. That choice has been taken out of their hands. Now, conservative-minded people have a problem with that. Socialists, well, if the government tells me, I'm all right with it. Okay, I think you guys have heard enough of me ranting for a little while. I'm going to bring somebody in with some more nuanced thought and commentary on this whole thing. We've got our guest, Michael Johns, in the lobby. Let's pull him into the stream and get another perspective. Hi there, Michael. How's it going down there in the States?
Well, it's a struggle, but let me just say it's a great honor to be back with you and nice to talk to you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I believe it was last summer we had you on for a little while, and that's when our show was really just in its formative place. We shut it down for a while, and we've rebooted, and our quality and audience are much better than they used to be, so I appreciate your coming back to talk to us today.
Yeah, I've had an opportunity to speak with your, I don't want to kind of call them colleagues at the CBC, and I have to say, of all of the global media outlets, I don't think I've ever seen more closed-mindedness of any media outlet in the world. And so when I look at Canada, it's so essential that conservative voices be heard, and that you have mediums through which to present them. And look, this there's never been a political consensus in Canada behind Trudeau or the Liberal Party, and it's eroding rapidly. Don't just, my guidance really to all the people of Canada is don't just allow that to happen. Realize that you have to be proactive in your leadership and offer solutions. And that's why I'm impressed, but not surprised to see the great leadership that's been coming out with this trucker convoy up there, and which is, against all the odds because it's being misrepresented, and the crackdown on it is utterly absurd and anti-democratic in my view.
Yeah, well, and that's where I appreciate your voice, because you've got, of course, a deep experience in challenging the establishment and in organizing with the means you have at your disposal to see how you can make change with what's there democratically. And that's what you did with the Tea Party. Like when the protests, whenever this gets settled in Canada, and us being now under martial law, who knows what's going to happen in the weeks to come, but eventually it will be settled. Where do Canadians go, right? As you said, there is no consensus. I mean, even in the election, Trudeau only got 30-some% of the vote.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, under 40% at the high point of his popularity. And, the frustration that I hear from really, the people of Canada is the fact that the great concerns of day-to-day Canadians are just, it's not even like they're being addressed poorly. They're not even being addressed, period. And a large part of that just seems to be Trudeau's unwillingness to realize the role of political leadership. Like, for instance, when you say I'm challenging the establishment, my view has always been, well, no, I mean, I'm like doing my best to bring to the attention of policymakers and to our government on federal and state and local levels the concerns that the people have. Now, that's been called populism, but to me, that's inseparable from democracy, because if we're not doing that, what exactly are we doing? We're either surrendering leadership to a number of all-knowing elites. In your case with Trudeau, a guy who's literally never worked, to the best of my knowledge, outside of government, born into a political family with a head of state father, and has spent his entire career, more or less in these Ottawa political circles. I don't care. You take the best of people with the best of intentions, and let me just be generous and say maybe he, was that, or is that. You're not experiencing the totality of the political culture that you're being charged with addressing. And I think that's the frustration that I see, not just in the Western provinces where it's boiling over, but throughout Canada, of a government that, ostensibly is democratic, but is not operating in democratic means.
Yeah, well, there's some irony in that, they love throwing out the term that we're privileged and we don't understand we're privileged. Progressives like using that. But I can't think of too many people in Canada who have born and raised and grown into a world of privilege more so than Justin Trudeau. And I can't even fault him for that. Hey, you're born into what you are. It's not like he should have left the family and lived as a pauper to get some life experience, but he's never been outside of that cloistered world.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I've worked for at least two elected political officials who were very much from political families, and I do understand how beneficial that can be, and how it can be inspiring to lead the next generation into it. But the concern with Trudeau is, given the option between sort of hobnobbing with this Davos set of global leaders, forcing these unpopular, extreme, very extreme, I don't want to call them climate measures, they're really financial redistribution schemes, onto the people of Canada, decimating your country's energy needs, and now acting in ways that are really not at all supported by any scientific basis, and are hurting people, right? Hurting children in school, hurting people with vaccines. One of the, on the we shouldn't call it a vaccine, really. I mean, we have to get our arms around the lingo. We got to get more proactive on this whole issue. But even just on a clinical basis, these are unusual, sort of inoculations. I mean, and I'm troubled, and even as someone who's defended and continues to defend pharmaceutical innovation and has worked in the profession, that we're not being upfront with people about what this is. It really was forced on people. And let's be honest. I mean, what are the long-term ramifications of this? I mean, if these companies tell you they have any sense of understanding what they are, they're just contriving that. I mean, you don't know until you know. And we already have had, this is a point I've made in the United States, sadly, this extraordinary effort to document every single case of COVID and every COVID death. And in my view, there's a good chance both of those have been inflated because we put in place hospital and healthcare incentives for them to declare these cases. They were rewarded financially for treating these patients. So, maybe I'm wrong, and every single institution has been above board on that. But the meticulousness that's gone into collecting and documenting these cases and the deaths has not been met on the other side, but documenting the clinical incidents related to these so-called vaccines. And my question is simply, look, I mean, maybe that documentation would actually be reassuring to those who haven't gone through the process, or maybe it would be troubling to them. But it's certainly information that is available and yet is being denied in the United States and in Canada, those who are trying to make an educated healthcare decision on this. And I think that's, part of the frustration that's also motivated this trucker convoy. And let me say, I'm with these truckers. I'm concerned about it. I don't, I want to reiterate, and I've just done this repeatedly since my engagement in particularly grassroots populism, about avoiding violence, not just because it's illegal, not just because it's going to hurt people, but also because it's never beneficial to us politically. And I think it's going to be difficult because we're dealing with opposition forces now that really don't have compelling political ideas. They're really not even pretending to be engaged in this battle of ideas that I think drives those of us on our side. This is, to them, like everything's a street brawl, and we've got 38, I don't know if you've heard the latest in the United States, 38,000 truckers launching a convoy out of Los Angeles that is scheduled to arrive. They're not going into Washington, D.C. They're going to stop along the way in Arizona and Ohio. I suspect maybe they add a few other stops between now and then. And then they're going to go all the way up to Hagerstown, Maryland, which is kind of part of greater Washington, D.C., and get there just about in time for Biden's State of the Union address in early March.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you about that, actually, because we had heard rumblings about it. Now, do you feel, I mean, you guys, the Americans have a much stronger basis of protecting the citizens from government. I mean, it's entrenched much more in your Constitution. It's because you were, yes, and you were born of revolution. Right. It was there was a mistrust of the state right off the bat. Unfortunately, in Canada, we kind of just evolved out of a monarchy. So the parliament system might have been an improvement over the feudal system, but it hasn't entrenched that respect for the ability of individuals.
Snowballing, don't you? I mean, this is part of my message in the United States about, with me taking great liberty to speak on the behalf of Canadians, is to sort of say that, look, in my interaction with Canadians, with the people, right, not with this Trudeau governing crowd, that the frustrations are growing and that we're underestimating the commitment to liberty and sensibility and to populist opposition that I believe is a very constructive development. And, while you and I spoke, and I continue to believe that this continues to build in Alberta and Saskatchewan and other Western provinces, it's a countrywide phenomenon. And it's a positive thing, because if you're going to get the country back on the right track. You can't rely on this elite that has, let's be honest, alternative agendas. They're not particularly concerned about how the people that they were elected to represent view what they're doing. They're much more concerned about their fellow elites around the world, the financial opportunities that will emerge for them after they leave office. And all of the incentives are structured in ways that are a disincentive to do what an elected, democratic, free nation should be doing, and that is representing the will of the people. And when the people, by the way, are not in line with what a government wants to do, the obligation isn't to shut them down violently, like it's being done in Canada, and to some extent, and in other ways, it's been done in the United States with famously the targeting of the Tea Party movement by the IRS. First times in American history where we extracted an apology from a federal government agency. You need to persuade the American people, and that's always been my position in government too, is that the trust of the people in the government is one that's two-way communication. The government has to hear the people, and if the government doesn't agree with the people, and it's going to try to take the policy direction and an alternative route, then you have to convince the people. And this is what's frustrating. This is what's driving this outrage. And in Europe, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Latin America, in the United States, and in your country of Canada, literally all around the world, is the fact that governments are not taking the effort to try to be persuasive. And I think, Trudeau had gotten up there and sort of, given a very carefully developed, statistically laden, and empathetic presentation and appealed to people, he would have gotten a much better response than trying to force this sort of down their throat without that kind of deliberation. And then my sense, even with the House of Commons and his engagement there, it's not a responsive one. And that's not good government,
No, not at all. And I mean, I respond better to reason than somebody running in with putting a gun to my head and telling me to do something. And there perhaps could have been a lot more reason they could have tried, and they wouldn't have had this. But now that it has happened, the mistrust has grown. The convoy is gone. I think it's made a mark. As I said, it's inspired things in the States, and I'm very excited in watching that grow. But where do you think we go now? I mean, I'm in the West, and I know where our thoughts tend to go, and that goes towards back to the pursuit of Western independence, because it looks like the system's broken. I mean, the citizens can be shut down by force, literally, if they push back. And what else are we supposed to do?
Well, that's really the ultimate question, isn't it? But I think, I will say that, is this 38,000 convoy coming out of California going to be nothing, or is it going to be a defining moment? I'm leaning much more toward it being a defining moment. I don't know how this administration and our law enforcement and federal law enforcement will respond to it. I will tell you that as of today, literally in the last 24 hours, sort of news here, the fencing protection of the United States Capitol, which in my view and in the view of many, was left up entirely too long as a point of political symbolism, not as any legitimate reaction to any threat to the Capitol after January 6th, is being restructured and put back up. And again, it's sort of the others. Let me put Biden and Trudeau in the same sort of category, just for the purposes of simplicity here. They're not the same. These guys are very good at political symbolism and in political maneuvers and in the operational components of American politics. All of those functions are ultimately not terribly beneficial to the people, because the people benefit with the policy. The objections that are emerging en masse, particularly as it relates to young children, is totally justified and understandable, not supported at all clinically. And I go back, and I think we just need to keep pushing this out, even in the United States, with Fauci's early interview on 60 Minutes, where he downplayed masks and their clinical functionality and utility in the case of COVID. and it's just like their positions change. And now they're changing again, by the way, on our state level in the United States, because they see basically the opposition that's emerging, and the clock is ticking toward a 22 midterm election where they are positioned, in my view, for one of the biggest clockings in American history. I mean, I'm talking about 100 seat clocking, presuming that we can have a free and fair election down here. And now all of a sudden, they're gonna try to say, hey, the science is changing, and we're gonna we'll be a little more liberalized on this. But no science has changed. It's really these decisions have been hugely politicized, almost every one of them under the Biden administration, and Trudeau has been, an extraordinary offender of that as well, sadly.
Yeah, well, I'm really, hoping again. I mean, as you said, you're looking with optimism. I mean, our truckers convoy started with just a couple hundred out in the west, and by the time it got to Ottawa, wow, it had expanded and snowballed into something massive. And there's definitely that potential to happen with yours down south. And my biggest fear now too, though, is communication. It's getting information out. As you said, our CBC is just something else. And we have a bill. I don't know if you'd heard about that up in Canada. They took it off the table because the election got called last fall, and then they brought it back. It's called C11, and they're looking to control digital media. They're looking to
this is the national emergency legislation.
This isn't even related to that. This was something they were going for even before that, and they're going to push.
I was just looking at on the national emergency legislation on the House of Commons vote, and 185 to 151. Mm-hmm. It's not exactly overwhelming support in the House of Commons. You can see how so if you've been engaged, whether you were in the trucker convoy and opposition, or whether you're involved in other political opposition to Trudeau, and if maybe you're frustrated and thinking you're losing, you're not losing. I mean, you can see that the metrics on this, and I would cite this House of Commons vote, are beginning to reflect the mounting opposition and the public opposition that is emerging. And that's basically what our design is, and again, to reiterate, not accomplishing anything which is difficult, to avoid sometimes in this heated political climate with any violence. But when the people see that others share their sentiments, they feel much more liberated to join in them. It's almost a psychological process that I think they go through. And this is going on all over the world right now, where people are sort of housed up and they're facing all the ramifications of overreactions and questions as it relates to China's Communist Party and their culpability in this, why we're not being more assertive about it, what's going on. I mean, that's the big question in the United States, in my view. What's the motivation? I don't believe it's incompetence, and I don't like our side describing it as that. It seems by design. And the frustration is just to kind of, pull the comforter over your head and hope for the best. And that my best message to everyone is, no, don't do that. But also don't work in isolation. One of the reasons and you were saying, I think I heard your commentary right before I came on about how individualism is a driving force among conservatives. That certainly is absolutely true. It's also not a tactic that is most effective in any political dynamic. It's one of the reasons I think that we have had such substantial losses of major institutions over the last few decades, which were absurd. We in the United States, we've won more elections than we've lost our side, but we're losing the country. Well, why is that? In my view, it's a leadership problem on our side, and we need to look at ourselves, because controlling and fixing our own side, even if there's not an inclination among some to do that, you have to do it. That's the easier fix, because you are not going to convince a Justin Trudeau or a Joe Biden out of the blue that somehow they're misguided in their outlook. These are very carefully deliberated positions that they've developed, and they hold them very adamantly.
Yeah, well, in conservatives, I think one of our biggest flaws is we tend to eat our own. I mean, we're terrible infighters, but there's nothing harder to organize than an individualist. So it's just against our very nature to march in lockstep, but which has an advantage.
We have to fix this part of it, okay? And what I will tell you, and this certainly is one of the biggest lessons to come out of the Tea Party movement, is no one on that original founding call in February of 2009 ever felt that we would inspire literally tens of millions of Americans to become politically involved. Most of those people hadn't even been involved historically. Largest independent grassroots political movement in American history. But people were looking for it. And once they realized that they were not alone in the way that they were looking at things, they felt much more liberated to get involved. Because I think many people in isolation feel that they're in a distinct minority. They're like, well, look, this government's all knowing and they're taking in a certain direction and we're not seeing any public opposition. And the sense is that maybe you have fallen out of line with the broader political sentiments of your country's people, but that's almost never the case. If you instinctually feel that your government's moving in the wrong direction, particularly if you're feeling financially or socially or in any other capacity, the ramifications of that, the chances are there's a lot of other people that are feeling the exact same way. But you're never going to know it until you engage in a very unified public way.
Yeah, well, and that gives some seeds of hope, and I'm glad to hear that, because something that was also inspiring out of the truckers' convoys and talking to people involved within that was, again, most of them probably were never politically involved before. Like, these were people who, again, were comfortable just staying at home and avoiding it, but they felt compelled. They'd had enough. It's time to get up and do something. They don't know how even. They found this and they went with it, and they're not going to stop now. I mean, the convoy's not gone.
Keep pushing on. That's my advice. My best advice, hopefully pretty seasoned advice here, is even despite the reaction, be inspired by this. I mean, the Canadian truckers have inspired the world in a lot of ways. I mean, this is a global story. Everyone knows about it, and it's been viewed generally positively by the people as, okay, here finally are these people that have had enough. And, in their personal cases, I mean, ponder the absurdity of wearing them. I mean, they were literally having to wear masks as they were driving trucks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, you find me any public health expert who says that is clinically justifiable. I would like to speak with them about that. I mean, that's just over the top, and their reaction is entirely justified. In fact, I hope that they're coordinating closely with the California-based convoy that's about ready to launch in the United States. 38,000 is a lot of trucks, and like you correctly said, I think it will be joined along the way. And this could be a real defining moment, setting up, major opposition momentum to this administration in the United States. And who, in my view, they have no safety net on their political popularity, unlike previous administrations. And Biden is collapsing. You see it in independence where, I mean, he's into the 30s now, and there's probably no safety net as far as how far he could fall. Unlike Obama and Trump, they might have been controversial with their opponents, but they always kind of had that, 40% base support in the United States that would stand by them. There's none of that for this administration. And why would there be? They've literally done nothing positive for the country in 13 months.
Yeah, well, I really, like yourself, I'm hoping this turns into something huge. It certainly did in Canada, and I don't see why it won't down there. And again, that would inspire people back and forth up here. I mean, we're more unified as North Americans than we've seen in a long time. So I really appreciate you coming on with me today. Where can we follow you and keep up with what you're doing, and just keep up with the states in general? Yeah,
thanks, Cory. I'm on just about everything. Twitter with my name, one word, Michael Johns. On Facebook, Michael Johns Tea Party. Have a group now on Facebook that provides conservative and liberty-minded content to activists under my name, Michael Johns, which is worth joining. And I'm on all of the emerging, purportedly conservative-friendly alternative sites. My advice on this whole thing is to not give up on the established ones. No need to retreat. We need to resolve any concerns we have there, and we're not going to advance the cause just by walking away from it. Though we never should have ended up in this position. I mean, it's just another example of a lack of leadership to allow the other side to monopolize such a crucially important medium.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. I hope we get to talk again soon. We're watching history being made, and perhaps we'll be able to analyze what happened in months to come.
God bless Canada. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Michael. So as we said, that was Michael Johns from down in the United States. And yes, he joined me on one of my earlier shows as well. And he's got a lot of experience in organizing. And as I framed it earlier, just pushing back against the establishment. What I meant was, like, again, their politics are different. The Tea Party was a movement within the Republican Party. In Canada, we spawn new parties all the time and push. But in their case, it was a larger organization to try and shift the direction of the Republican Party one way or another. And they certainly changed it with, it's undeniable, as he said, that they started a grassroots movement that really caught the interest of a lot of people. And we're seeing now something of an undirected grassroots movement. That's the thing with the convoy. There's no solid leader. I mean, that's why I think they're also wasting their time incarcerating, what I'll call a political prisoner, like Tamara Leach and others. It's not stopping this. I mean, they've shoved them down, but the people who were discontent last week are still just as discontent as they were, today. It hasn't gone away. They're going to look to new means to protest, new ways to establish themselves. They're not going to rest until all the mandates are gone. And why are we clinging to these bloody things? Why are we so hung up on these things? The rest of the world is changing. They're getting rid of these mandates. It's a political point on Trudeau's part. It's a bit of pride with the moron now. And look at the damage it's causing. I mean, I've said it in past shows. Lie to us. It's nothing new to you, Justin. Don't worry about it. I'm okay with it. Lie to us. Say you got a whole new government report from doctors, medical people said, you know what? We don't need the vaccines the mandates anymore and any of that stuff. We're getting rid of it. Had nothing to do with the protests. Absolutely not. They're still jerks, whatever you want to say, but we're getting rid of it. Once those mandates are gone, things will calm down. That's the bottom line. And you know what? As long as they're there, they're not going to calm down. Do you think the people who dedicated that time and that effort and the money to go to Ottawa to support the convoy, take part in the convoy, are just going to throw their hands up and say, oh, well, it's over? Of course not. They aren't done by a long shot. Then I do worry. And I mean, I'm with Michael Johns on that. It has to be peaceful. We have to stay peaceful. But we got some people who don't feel that way. And they're feeling cornered. And they've run out of options. There's people who've lost their jobs. There's people who've been shut off from their family. There's people in all sorts of different conditions. And some might get desperate and do something desperate. And I do not want to see it. There's nothing worse than cornering somebody. That makes them dangerous. And we're taking passive, law-abiding, safe, good citizens, and we're making them dangerous. We're creating potential criminals. And that lands on the lap of the government, not on the people on the ground. You are inflaming people, you're dividing people, you're pushing people, and it's going to have a bad outcome. Now they've lost the means of the convoy as a means of protest. For now. They've lost at least the Ottawa setup. As I said, Calgary had thousands of people marching. And look at that, the establishment media, they didn't want to cover that. Why? Because they want to make sure that people think it's done. It's not. It's not. And here's a note from Blacklock's reporter. These guys, there might be a Western Standard story on there too. They're a news aggregator for us. And these guys have a report. The Canadian Embassy in Washington is paying thousands to consultants to influence U.S. thought leaders on social media, according to records. The initiative coincided with American media criticism of a cabinet order invoking the Emergencies Act against truckers opposed to vaccine mandates. Think about that. Our government is sending money down to the embassy in Washington so they can pay off social media leaders to parrot the Canadian government message. They're ticked off because, yes, the American media was critical of their Emergencies Act. Like I said, even the New York Times, that they can't control, as left-wing as they are, wasn't supportive of the Trudeau government. So now the government is sending your Canadian tax dollars into the United States to pay off thought leaders, as the term is, on social media, according to records. This is a report. So they can try and change the narrative. Man, where do we come to? And yeah, I get accused of that now and then too. Oh, the oil companies must be paying you. Oh, I wish. Come on, I'd have a tailor-fitted suit if that was the case, guys. Nobody's paying me here. Well, I'm getting paid, but not by the government. And, I'll throw that plug out again for the importance of independent media, because we do have an information war going on. That's what's happening. And so I was talking about C11 with Michael Johns. And that's what I was talking about with this news now, that the government's sending money down to try and influence American broadcasters even. They want to control the message. Don't let them. So go to the Western Standard, take out a membership, help support us, guys. It's really important, and I'll put plugs to the other ones out there too. Rebel Media, True North with Candace, those other, post-millennial, Epic Times, all the individual independent ones, we need to keep them running, guys. The government does not want them reporting on things without their control. So again, those who have taken up memberships with us, thank you. And those who haven't, please take it out, check it out. You'll find it worth it. It's good. It'll be the best $10 a month you could spend. And you get, again, all that. The more you join, the more we can get reporters, the more we can create, get the content out to you, because we have a war for information going on, and the government wants to shut that conversation down. We can't let it happen. Follow me on Twitter and the rest. Another report that hospitalizations, ICU admissions, again, are dropping to record lows in Ontario. So why are we still fixated on holding these mandates up? It's going against the science now. They always used to like to claim the science was on their side. Well, science isn't on their side anymore. That's part of the reason I think they want to stop the reporting as well. If we keep reporting, cutting through and reporting the science, well, it's not going to fit their damn narrative. We're in crazy, dangerous times. And I touched on it briefly earlier. I mean, something to be watching. It was at Makachuk, one of our columnists, he definitely follows the international scene closely, and he writes on it constantly. And he's been a guest on here. The Ukraine-Russia situation right now. This is nuts. I mean, you've got Eastern Ukraine independence movements, essentially secessionist movements that have broken away. Putin is declaring those as part of Russia. They're funding that. They're recognizing new borders. Guys, we got basically an expansionist regime taking bites out of Eastern Europe. This is a time when the West should be standing up and being concerned. The communist bloc got shut down, thankfully, and fell apart. But now a new authoritarian regime is coming into the Europe, and it's dangerous and it's frightening. But we're all busy pissing around, incarcerating people like Tamara Leach, stealing dogs from people who take part in truckers' convoys, and invoking the Emergencies Act because of bouncy castles. Our country is so far off track. It's frightening. It really is. We got to get it back on, and we'll talk about those things. We're not afraid of it, but we need that support to keep doing it. Because again, we're not taking any government dollars. We won't be independent the second we do. So it's just not going to happen. But most of the other media outlets are, and that's part of why they sound as if they were communications officers for the Liberal Party of Canada when they talk. And the other ones that help us, again, are our sponsors. I'm going to talk one more time about Bitcoin Well. And, just again, for finding out what's going on, finding out how digital currencies work, particularly Bitcoin. Bitcoin Well partnered with Power ED by Athabasca University, and they created a free online curriculum about Bitcoin. They call it Bitcoin Academy. If you go to bitcoinwell.com/learn, you can enroll in it, and you can take an online course. Again, it'll make you feel more comfortable knowing how these digital currencies work, how you can safely take part in them. And there's corporate setups you can do too. We have that at the Western Standard. I get a percentage of my salary comes in Bitcoin. It goes into my wallet. Kind of a little hedge of savings on the side. Derek set that up for us. And it's voluntary, of course. Employees don't have to take part in it, but it's a great way to get involved and set some money apart in a way and in a place that the government will never be able to get it. So make sure to keep going to the Western Standard Online to get that stuff. We're going to have a lot of news breaking. I mean, it just keeps coming. Dave and Eva and Amber, Reed, you name it. The list's getting too long for me to read them out all the time. We're hiring all the time at the Western Standard. They're reporting like crazy. Tomorrow, I'm going to have Lindsay Seawalt of Alberta Proud on. She's taking a run at our Liberal Minister Guilbeault. And we're going to have Jeff Calloway of Algodex coming on as a guest in studio as well to talk about some developments there. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. Really appreciate it. Keep supporting us, and we'll keep supporting liberty and free information. I'll see you all tomorrow.